G'day folks, this is Shane. Today I'm going to give you some test footage, both the good and the bad, from the Moza Aircross gimbal. Now this is something I've used with my GH5, G85 and FZ or FZ2500, all Panasonic cameras, and I've got some mixed emotions about it, and I'm also going to explain why I took it back. Let's get into it. So before we get into why I took it back, I'm going to explain a little bit about it and show you some test footage as well. So first up, I'm going to show you some test footage shot in Cine D with my GH5 with my 12-60 kit lens. It's a really great lens and it seemed to work really well on the gimbal. Now one thing to take into account too is the fact that sometimes this cap can also get in the way. So if you have this particular lens, probably take off this plastic cap. So out of the three cameras I mentioned before, the GH5, the G85 and the FZ2500, which camera do I think best suits the Moza Aircross? Without question, the G85. It's lighter, it's smaller, and with the small kit lens or a 25mm lens or something like that, it's nice and small, nice and light, and it just works. The motors don't have any problems with that particular camera. Now what you saw was some pretty nice footage, just all shot in 4K 25p, no slow-mo or anything like that, but what you didn't see was everything that went wrong with the GH5 on that gimbal. Now, the weight requirement of the gimbal says that the GH5 should be absolutely no problems at all. It's even on the back of the box, and this was one of the reasons why I returned it today. It just didn't work so great. It had a number of problems, but before we get into that, I'll also just explain about the FZ2500. This is a fantastic camera with a massive zoom lens attached to the front. It's a 24 to 480 lens, and it always stays like this. So even if you zoom in, nothing mechanical happens with the zoom once you turn this on. It can stabilize this, but you're forever banging into sections of the gimbal, especially if you want to point down or point up. You tend to always knock into something on the gimbal. So I wouldn't recommend this. It will work for stationary shots and just walking straight ahead, but anytime you want to turn or tilt up and down, it's probably not the best camera to be putting on that particular gimbal. One of the huge downsides of this particular system with the Moza Aircross is the fact that the cable that goes from the gimbal to the actual camera, the shutter button, doesn't reach. So you have to go get a third-party one. I didn't even bother. I know they do sell them, but they should have been included in the box. It's way too short, it just doesn't reach. So if you want to hit record, you actually have to hit record on the camera. Not a deal breaker, but also at the same time, kind of sucks getting a cable you can't even use. All right, I've added a different light as well just to mix things up. So this particular shot is the one you saw right at the start, but look at what happens at the end of this shot. I'm trying just to hold it stable and still in one position, and then boom, it just loses all power. And here it is again. Nice. On this next shot, I'm actually trying selfie mode. I've got the actual angle of the gimbal at about 45 degrees from my hand, so it's not a strained angle on the motors or anything like that. I'm holding it out further than it probably looks, and this is the shot you saw at the start, and then it starts to sort of drift off into somewhere else. How crazy is this? I'm holding it in exactly the same spot, and it almost came back. And then I'm shooting this shot, which I think you might have seen. Can't remember if I put that in. And then it does it again. It just goes sideways and kind of collapses over. You actually see me sort of use my hand to try to get it back to somewhere stable, and then it kind of kicks back in, and I'm like, okay, so this should work now, and no. And it did this over and over again. It was super frustrating. Don't try and use this in selfie mode. Not that it's a selfie stick, but it should be able to handle the angle. I'm not putting any strain on the motors like this either. As you can see, I'm now using the joystick to bring it around to myself, and I'm swearing, and it just falls over again. Nice. Oh man, it's horrible. Why doesn't it stay like that? So to get the camera to face your own feet is next to impossible on this gimbal. It was nothing but frustrating. I did manage to get it after quite some time. You can see in the shadows that I'm actually holding it straight out from my body. I used the joystick to get it to face down, so it should have worked, but it just kept resisting. And that's when I realized, yeah, I'm taking this back. This shot, I'm literally just trying to get the gimbal to work. Now, I also had my iPhone out so I could show the staff at the shop I bought this from that I was having problems. Let's check it out. It's on. It's gone loose again. New batteries. Field test. This was my biggest complaint, and I muted out my swearing coming up, that it just went limp for no reason with regular use. I'm not doing anything to strain it, and it literally, like, the camera's just floating like it's off, even though the unit's on. I had to then get my phone out and recenter the gimbal every time this happened, or I had to hard power it off and turn it back on. Watch what happens when I've got it in selfie mode. Now, take into account my arm isn't moving. You're actually watching the camera move instead of my arm. Now I'm trying to compensate, and bang, it goes off again. Crazy stuff. The good news is, if I needed a lot of B-roll of trees from this particular angle, I got a lot of it. Now, I actually used the joystick here once it kicked back in to turn it back around towards my face, and then... let's try this again. Oh, off. No, it's not having any part of that at all. What a load of shit. One of the things that really sucked was I traveled about 1 hour or so out of the city to hit this mountain and to do this trail, and only to have problems. It was a huge waste of my time. This is actually a second shoot as well. I erased my memory card the first time, which was all wasted footage as well, very similar to what you're seeing right now, maybe even worse. So I shot everything again, and it was right about now. I just thought, you know what, I'm heading home, I'm taking this thing back, I don't want it anymore. I actually went out and purchased the Moza Aircross after owning the Moza Mini Me, which is their mobile phone gimbal, and I love that thing. It still works great. I've used it a lot. I think it's one of the best things out there for the money. If you haven't seen my review of that, I'll post it up in the card. So I went out and I just purchased this. I thought, you know what, this has to be good. I watched some YouTube reviews. Oh man, it was a frustrating time, and I'll tell you why. The benefit of the Moza Mini Me is you can do everything pretty much from the control panel on the front of the gimbal, but not with the Aircross. You need the app, and if the app disconnects, like it does quite a bit, even with an iPhone, I found it very, very unreliable. I also found it non-responsive a lot of the time. If your phone goes into standby mode, you sometimes lose connectivity. And another huge problem I had with it was, especially in selfie mode, if you've got the camera facing you and you use the joystick to turn the camera around, or however you want it to face yourself, right? If you're walking with it like this and you turn it left or right, sometimes it just spazzes out or the motors glitch and you get an error on the phone that says, motors are going into safety mode, please reboot gimbal, or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact error message, but it was something like that, and it happened over and over. Or it would just go crazy and go all over the place, or the motors would just shut down and it would go into sort of like flaccid / flop mode. Why did I use that word? But you get the point. It just basically was useless in selfie mode. One of the massive problems I had with this particular gimbal with the GH5 and not with the G85 was the fact that if I wanted to sort of tilt the camera up and look at the trees and I'm holding it like this, it's completely balanced beforehand and done properly. I can assure you of that. Now, if you tilt the camera up, it would get to a point and it wouldn't go any further. And then if you keep pushing up on the joystick, so it would go to about, I don't know, like that. So you get a diagonal, it would never look straight up or even close to it. The motor error would kick in, or it would just basically shut itself down and go all flaccid again, which kind of sucks. I just don't understand why that was the case. And it also did the exact same thing if I was looking at my shoes, for example, and holding it out horizontally like this, with the camera facing down, it would still have that same problem. And this only happened with the GH5, and this is my favorite camera out of all of them. The FZ2500 is an awesome camera too, but it's just that little bit too big for this gimbal. So I took it back and I got a refund. I guess after my positive experience with the Moza Mini Me, I was hoping that the Moza Aircross was just going to be awesome, and I really miss not having all the functionality on the front. Having to have your phone out every time you want to use something is so distracting, and I hate having my phone on me at the best of times. I've got it on my lap because I'm using it as a reference monitor right now, but I just hate having to grab my phone, especially if you're in the middle of a shot and you have to rebalance it. There's no real easy way of doing that without using the app to sort of rebalance and recenter the gimbal. Whereas the mobile phone gimbal, you can do that at a touch of a button. Nice and simple. I don't know why the functionality didn't carry across to its bigger brother. The Moza Aircross looks pretty nice when you walk with it. It's not perfect. I didn't do the ninja walk or anything like that. I was walking as I would normally. The video that you saw was actually for a friend of mine who's coming here from overseas. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna just take out this gimbal, give it a good field test, and that's when it failed. I did some really basic shots down the beach with it with a few of my other cameras. I wanted to make sure I understood what I was doing before I took it out. So over the last 2 weeks, I've used it quite a number of times, and I'm just extremely disappointed with it. So where do I go from here? Well, you know what? I'm not sure I need a gimbal anymore. I'm kind of a little bit over it. The thing is, when you start buying some of these gimbals and they're large and you want to take them traveling with you, it's more weight. So for me, I may actually just stick with the Moza Mini Me. I love that thing, even though I'm sort of stuck using my mobile phone. The iPhone has a pretty good camera and it does the job for most things, especially when you travel. So what can I tell you? I'm not 100% certain I'll go buy another one as of right now, but if you have some suggestions for a better gimbal, or even if you own one of these Moza Aircrosses and you've had no problems, please let me know in the comments too. My suggestion is, if you're gonna get a gimbal, make sure you don't need to have your phone on for it to work. Just buy something that you can, have most of the functionality on the front. So if your battery goes flat in your phone, or you don't have it with you, or if you prefer not to use it like I do, then you don't need it. And I think that's a good thing. Think about functionality, not having everything. If your phone was lost, you'd almost be screwed if you didn't have it with this particular gimbal. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold on the idea of this particular one, but let me know your thoughts. I know the footage that worked should look pretty good, even from amateur from my perspective. I shoot a lot of videos, but I usually do them indoors in controlled conditions. I got some pretty cool slow-mo shots for some of my other product videos that I was doing with the gimbal, but nothing out in the field, and that's where it sort of failed, and I was really disappointed. And lastly, I just couldn't risk any of my cameras or lenses getting damaged, especially the GH5. This cost me a fortune here in Australia when I bought it, and I just couldn't risk damaging it. And when the gimbal goes limp for no reason, kind of sucks. Thanks again for watching, folks. My name's Shane. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. Like I said, huge fan of the Moza Mini-Me, not a huge fan of the Moza Aircross, I gotta tell you. With Panasonic cameras, there's a few things working against it, I gotta tell you, but I've seen some spectacular results as well. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Thanks again for watching. Catch you soon. See ya.